to the Ukraine thing, in the Economics article, they are criticizing Ukraine strategy and corruption. And the big part is rumors about US pressure to give up territory to Russia. Is it about one more confusion coming on for the US? What should we make out of that? It is a rumor, but you would know better. You have got great insights and information about all those things. So help us understand what is happening to Ukraine, what one may make out of the Economist article, and what can one make out of what is happening in the Ukraine Russia war.
So the US is facing a number of challenges. The primary challenge is that there's a shortage of professionals capable of navigating between multiple simultaneous crises. And by the way, most of these crises have the same set of actors who are involved in whatever capacity. So it's not like we have completely independent things happening at the same time. They're not completely independent, they are related, but we have a shortage of trained personnel. A lot of the foreign policy people in the Biden administrations come from very theoretical backgrounds and are not equipped to handle the political processes for dealing with these issues. So it's not that they're becoming a complete distraction. Nobody has forgotten that the war in Ukraine is still ongoing and needs to be dealt with and resolved. But there's a very strong fear of immediate escalation in the Middle East, where there's a number of U.S. troops physically stationed, unlike Ukraine, where where their political personnel occasionally present in advisory capacity, but no direct U.S. involvement whatsoever. So it's not an issue of distraction; it's an issue of prioritizing more immediate and direct conflict where US is more directly involved and where there is a more immediate concern about the expansion of conflict. Russia has been far more careful about pushing for its agenda more slowly through proxies in various parts of Europe, through political and the asymmetrical warfare, and less so also for logistical reasons. It cannot start major wars directly everywhere because it has a shortage of personnel, and most of its attention has been directed towards Ukraine at the moment. So while there is a fear that Russia will escalate and push its agenda over time, it's not as immediate as what we're seeing in the Middle East, where a number of proxies are active simultaneously. There is another issue, which is that the White House cannot really control Congress, and it has some leverage. It does not necessarily know how to use it wisely. Its strategic proposals for dealing with the Ukraine aid have been shall we say, met with skepticism. First of all, due to initial failure to articulate concrete objectives and concrete strategies, and to provide weapons in advance, and not providing public discussion of what is necessary and for what purpose. So now we are facing a backlash from the Republicans in Congress who are fighting over budget, who've prioritized cutting Ukraine aid over all the other possible expenditures which could be and probably should be cut. And it's become a political football between parties, which a national security issue should never be, but we're operating in a very polarized climate with very poor communication and poor policy on both sides. So on the part of the Democrats, there's not a concrete vision because they're also double dealing with Russia. They're also buying metals from Russia, expanding their exports, trying to deal with Russia and China on climate change, this and that, not really fully going all in on economic and financial level, and certainly not providing any concrete roadmap for enforcing a victorious military strategy with and for Ukraine. The Republicans, on the other hand, are making it seem like none of it is a big deal, does not concern the United States, and exaggerating the budget issue a great deal. There's also a fight over whether Ukraine aid should be connected to Israel, and now there's a problem even with Israel aid, which is significantly less because Israel needs fewer weapons. It is already well equipped, but there are certain things that it needs for continuing to use the weapons that it has, the Iron Dome and so forth. But they have tried to tie it to the reduction of budget on the IRS, which is completely unnecessary. Those could be separate bills, and the House has a Republican majority, and none of those bills will go through Senate. So we are at a stalemate. The Republicans are refusing to negotiate with the Democrats. The border issue, which has also been tied into all this, has been a disaster because it does not really deal with border security so much as expanding the processing power of the migrants entering through the southern border. So it does not address either Republican or, for that matter, growing Democratic concerns. So all of these political issues are just not being well dealt with by anybody in this equation. There simply is a political morass with absolutely no progress whatsoever.
Absolutely, absolutely. All this infighting is going to impact Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Taiwan, and so we don't know what's going to happen to all these situations.
It's
And
very concerning as well because some of the issues that the Economist pointed out points to mistakes within the Ukrainian governance that are not being well dealt with. There is a concern over a recent issue involving the fact that a general who wrote this article has been reprimanded for pointing out that the war is at a stalemate. President Zelensky disagrees with this characterization and views this as a defeatist commentary that will likely undermine support. Others criticize that the overly optimistic PR strategy by Ukrainian lobbyists, which has created a false impression that Ukraine does not, in fact, really need a lot of American help, and that we are wasting resources by continuing to give money. So there's been this discrepancy that needs to be resolved. There needs to be a unified strategy from Ukraine, and right now is not the time to play politics.
right, right, Irina. Uh, what do we make out of this? Lots of pro Hamas rallies around the world and increasing anti Semitism. How do we deal with this? What can people understand about these things? Because Hamas is a totally different thing. Anti Semitism on the rise is also very alarming. How should people look at it? Are we seeing much more polarization in the coming days all through the world? Is there chance for more peace, or is it going to be a difficult world going forward?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's an increase in anti-Semitism. I think there's an increase in public expression of anti-Semitism. In other words, people who previously had reasons to stay quiet now feel unencumbered by social restraints to come out and publicly say it. Sometimes it's due to the way their governments behave and not take the serious issues. Sometimes it's because they feel that their numbers collectively have grown sufficient and their political and social influence is sufficient. And sometimes because they feel that Israel is in a weak position, US is polarized, Europe does not have a unified position on anything, and so they feel empowered to come out much more strongly and to take action in a way that they would not have previously. In big cities in the US, for instance, there has been a problem with law and order even before the war. There has been a rise in crime due to the policies in those cities. None of that has gone away once the war started. So this general attitude that has allowed crime to proliferate is now giving room for political expressions and politically motivated crimes to take place as well. The other issue is that over decades there's been cultivation of radical views through various institutions in the US, and as well as a congregation of politically radical pro-Islamist sympathizers who've, who've grown up listening to that sort of rhetoric in their religious institutions, family circles, and so forth. And there's been no effort to understand that ideology on either government or academic level. There has been uh, essentially a disinterest in it. And I think this leaves the West completely unprepared to confront the reality of these worldviews and ideologies once they become prevalent and publicly active. We have seen these manifestations before during Women's March, and some of these we've seen expressions of this anti-Semitic conduct in Congress. All of that has encouraged this sort of activity on the street. Even if Rashida Tlaib today is censored by the House, which she was, it doesn't. She's already been in Congress for 3 terms, which has allowed her to grow her audience, to kind of create a sense of political impunity. And so whoever is already radicalized now feels more confident in coming out in greater numbers, and others who are critical of such views now feel less powerful, less equipped to confront and to reject those sorts of ideologies. So, on the one hand, we have a growing power of hate and bigotry and fanaticism motivated groups. On the other hand, less equipment, less backing, less law enforcement interest for whoever is opposed to such views, whether in Muslim communities or outside of them. So we are seeing the power dynamic shift, which encourages these voices.
Right.